All right, so we are back. I have recovered from the Flash, thankfully, if you remember when we did that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to talk about that until Blue Beetle when we get to that. But anyway, I finally got a chance to see Oppenheimer, and no, I did not. We did not see this back to back with Barbie. I'm not giving into the Barbenheimer craze.
No.
Which do you want to talk about that a little bit?
The Barbenheimer or
Barbenheimer before we get into the actual movie.
well, I mean, since they both released at the exact same time, basically, so there are a good amount of people who will go see Barbie or first or second. And vice versa with Oppenheimer, first or second, because again, it came out the exact same time. So it's like, okay, we got Barbie, which is,
It's the fantasy comedy with,
Yeah.
I heard it talks about as existentialism and some other themes you wouldn't
Yeah.
even think about.
Yeah, but to kind of put it in a more shorter term or simpler term standard, Barbie having to face with reality.
Yes. I mean, that craze, it was basically two different movies, two contrasting tones, and
One's all pink and colorful sunshine that has to face dark reality, but still a lot of pink, versus Boom Boom.
yeah. But, I mean, I read the plot of the Barbie film online, and I'm like, I'm not in the target audience for
Yeah.
it. Because I kind of figured it wasn't a movie I would have liked, but whatever.
Yeah.
We did have a few people in the theater that were wearing pink. Like, I saw a few beforehand, maybe.
Yeah.
There were more after.
Yep. And because this was my second time showing at this point, because the first time it was a packed theater, my first time when I went to see it, and it was a decent amount of pink, but there were definitely, still a lot of people nonetheless at the theater first time. Second time, it was not a lot as the first time, but it was still a good amount though. After a week or two went by.
Yeah, I think the initial craze has kind of died down, but there's people that are probably still going to do it.
Yep.
So anyway, with Oppenheimer, because what was your initial reaction when you saw it the first time?
It was a really good film. Definitely was a war drama. Mostly it is fictional, not fictional, mostly factual, with some slight fictions.
Yeah, that was something I heard in other people's reviews, is that there's stuff that's true and then there's stuff that isn't true.
Yes, and the one that could be up to debate is the apple scene.
Oh yeah, that's the one people mention the most.
Yep, and especially, I believe, Oppenheimer's, grandson,
Yeah, he's recently come out and said that didn't happen. That's completely fabricated.
Yeah, because there were reports back then, too, of potentially him poisoning the apple. It was reports, although, again, it was speculative. Yeah. No harm, no foul, basically, though, that happened. So nobody died. Who knows about the apple? You don't know. All speculations.
Yeah.
Especially back then.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have what we have today, so you never know.
Yeah, you never know. Which is why, it's fair enough for Oppenheimer's grandson, I believe, to come out and say that should not have been played in theater, because that didn't happen.
Oh, definitely.
But that's one part of the fiction. Again, everything was actual except for at least that one scene. That apple scene was, you could say fictional fact, but that's play up in the air.
Yeah, so after we got out of the theater, my initial reaction to this was a well-made biopic, although I kind of want to classify it as a character study.
It is a character study. Character study, again, war and drama too, because again, this was basically Oppenheimer, and then he has to deal with the political aftermath, or even current, at his time, even current, because of what he had to go through or what he was doing, off the science stuff.
Yeah, and I'm going to let you comment on that one, because I'm not too well-versed in the politics. I may interject here and there.
Yes.
But, we'll see what we can do. But
yeah.
I thought this was actually a pretty well-made movie, because it's
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan. He typically makes movies that knock it out of the park,
Yeah.
And this is the third time he has gotten as high as 3 hours in his runtime.
Yes.
Because the other two were Dark Knight Rises, which wasn't really 3 hours, but it was close.
And
Then there was Interstellar, two films I actually like.
I think we saw Interstellar together, didn't we?
We did back in 2014. We saw
Yeah.
Interstellar, which
Yeah.
I loved that one.
Yep.
And Yeah, this is the third time he's gotten pretty high with 3 hours.
Yeah.
I will say this though with Oppenheimer, the 3 hour runtime. See, some people are like, we're not sure if this needed to be 3 hours.
Yeah.
However, though, the whole time we were watching it, I was not bored watching this.
Yeah, no, there's nothing boring about it because you're looking through what he had to deal with, basically.
Yes, and the other great thing about Nolan is that he makes his movies look very practical and beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
And you're so drawn in that like you'll see the other elements of the movie, like the story or just the production design, and you're so invested in it that you just want to keep going to see what happens until the end.
Yeah, and the way that they also did not only the colors but also the black and white effects, because this movie went back and forth more than several scenes of it being black and white or in color.
Yeah, and this was actually part of Nolan's non-linear storytelling.
Yeah.
The other time he did it was Memento, where that movie was like you had one segment, then you had another segment, and they were sort of like coming together. That was Memento. But with this one, that wasn't really happening, and I didn't have too much of a hard time following it. Like, I understood what was going on.
Yeah.
But maybe if I were to watch this again, I probably would get it a lot more.
Yeah. Probably again, and probably if you also, I mean, if you even just probably just look back a little bit into what was, or what probably like the reports were back then, or like, you know, if you, you know, again, digging up some like history lesson, like history research about what was happening during that time with Oppenheimer, and then
you have to deal with World War II and the fact that they're racing against the Nazis to build the atomic bomb.
Yep, and then when that was over, and then it became the Soviets. Although, in the movie though, it was not only an arms race against the Nazis. Some political and military high rankings were fearing of the Soviets as well.
Yeah, they mentioned that kind of briefly during the World War II and Nazi parts.
Yeah.
But then later towards the movie, they're really concerned about the Russians getting a hold of this technology. And I mean, if Nolan makes a sequel, it'll be set in the Cold War, but with different characters.
Probably, but I mean, Oppenheimer, I mean, he played at the back end. I mean, he had to deal with a couple things, but at least in the Cold War standards, it would have been probably two different people then.
Yeah, it would have been like more than one person. There'd be a whole group of them.
Well, you probably would have had Teller, because even in this movie, the hydrogen bomb was mentioned along with the atomic bomb.
Yes.
So that means also as well, not only that the atomic bomb was brought up and they were working more on that, but the idea of the hydrogen bomb was there back during World War II.
Yeah, and it wasn't until like the 1950s, I believe, that's when they started testing the hydrogen bomb, especially in the Pacific regions of the world.
Yeah, and that brought a lot more devastating effect than the atomic bomb.
Oh, definitely. But I actually do want to compliment one thing with the atomic bomb, is that Nolan did not show the explosion of Hiroshima or Nagasaki in this. And I'm like, okay, we all know what it looks like. We've seen the images. We've seen it in other movies. We don't need to see it again.
No, but we all know the aftermath of what happened, really.
Yeah, there were basically people who were dying of cancer. They had severe burns. Some went blind because they looked in the nuclear fire.
Radiation, infections and stuff like that. Like you said, burns. The UV just broken out, so that means the sun was able to do more damage than normal.
Yeah, they punched a hole through the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And then there was the black rain, which was radioactive black rain that fell from the sky. That's something I remember from my history courses.
Yep. So not only that, caused devastation in Hiroshima, but Nagasaki, which was Oppenheimer was dropping it the second time. He was all right with it first time, even though his moral was saying, but it was more of a, okay, if we have to do it once, we'll at least do it once, but don't do it a second time.
Yeah, that was kind of the impression I got watching this, is that he was for the creation of this atomic bomb. But then later on, we see, like, you can see it in his face, like, I've become death, the destroyer of worlds, which that quote was
from a Sanskrit, kind of like Arabian or...
Yeah, Sanskrit. And I actually, in my mind, I guessed it right. It was Sanskrit the first time.
Yep, it was Sanskrit, because he was able to learn a lot of languages too. Especially, as the movie showed, he learned Dutch in 6 weeks, really quickly, to the point where he can use that language to teach quantum physics.
Oh yeah, that scene where he's teaching the quantum physics to all his students, and there were some other people, I guess.
Yeah, there were some other people, especially one that became his partner as well in the Manhattan Project.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I mean, it's like I think I have to sort of go into the stuff that I did like about this movie before we start going into anything like political or morals of sorts.
Well, political did play a huge part of this movie as well. We gotta keep that in mind, because not only that, it influenced on his delayment of the Manhattan Project, at least being involved in the in the atomic or potential like nuclear testing and theorizing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
also later on with his security clearance.
Yes, I'm gonna sort of let you describe all that. I may interject here and there because I'm not completely well versed in all the political stuff.
Yeah.
I apologize, but sometimes I'm just not an expert in some subjects, and I let others do the talking when I know they're more well versed, and you are.
I'm more well versed just because I've heard about from my parents. They're from time to time talk about it with my friend, other friends. We're not completely experts on it, but I'm not completely experts on it, but know enough to where, okay, some of these things I can understand back then. What were some of the thinking process, or why they do this? Why was this happening? Maybe this was, why this was probably unfair or fair, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. So, in terms of what I liked with this movie, I liked the acting a lot. Like, no one in this movie gave a bad performance.
Yeah.
Everybody was doing exactly what they should do, because when it comes to Christopher Nolan and his movies, he gives the actors really good direction to where they can become the characters and be well versed. Mm-hmm. Like, I know Cillian Murphy, who plays Oppenheimer in this, mm-hmm. he's really committed to this role.
Yep.
And I can see him getting an Oscar nomination by next year.
Yeah, he did a really good job with Oppenheimer for sure. And then you had other characters as well, which if you didn't see the casting, which I guess, me and my other buddies, when we saw it the first time, we didn't really know who was part of the casting crew. So when we saw actors and actresses like Robert Downey Jr., we were like, wait, Robert's in this? And Florence,
Florence Pugh, I think that's how you say her name.
Yeah. Then eventually you get like some other characters that we've seen from like other like Marvel or
or other big productions,
or like Harry Potter, like Ron Weasley. I forgot the guy's name, but Ron Weasley dad was in it as well.
Which character did he play? Because I didn't catch him.
He was the he was the one of the teachers at the first college that we saw, basically in his earlier days. The one that was about to eat the apple, but then.
Oh, so he was the one. That was him. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't notice that the first time because you told me he was in this, but I had a hard time recognizing him.
Yeah, I recognized him when I saw him. I was like, that's Ron Weasley's dad? I'm like, oh my god.
It's almost like he's a Harry Potter actor that came out of hiding and wanted to be in another movie.
Yeah, which, speaking, I don't want to say hiding per se, but another person that caught me by surprise, Josh Peck, was in the film, and I was like, wait, what the heck is this?
I mean, Josh Peck is a name I've heard here and there, but what other productions has he been in?
Well, his major one that ever, at least our generation know him well in the Drake and Josh TV series from Nickelodeon.
Drake. Which character did he play? Because I never watched that show.
He played Josh Peck.
Oh my god, that was Josh Peck?
Josh Peck. Yeah, the big guy? Yeah, that's Josh Peck.
That was him?
That was him.
Which character did he play again? Because I didn't recognize him.
He played one of the scientists. He played the one scientist that eventually had to push, the button to drop the bomb for the testing.
Oh, he was the one that was, during the testing scene.
Yep, during the testing scene.
That was Josh Peck from Drake and Josh.
Yep.
He just blew my mind a little bit. Because I never watched that show. I mean, I heard of it, maybe saw a few clips, but that's like the equivalent of a Disney Channel star going to more mature roles.
Yeah, well, again, yeah, that too, yeah, but this was, for him, he came, again, I know him well, and of course other people probably know him more well as Josh Peck from Drake and Josh. And he played it well. When I saw it, me and my friends were like, "What the heck? We got an all-star cast going on here."
Oh yeah, but Robert Downey Jr. he actually played his role pretty well, I would say.
Yeah,
Because he did come out and say that he was afraid that playing Iron Man for so long may have sort of hurt his acting skills. That was not the case here.
no, he played it really well. Almost like Iron Man without the suit, basically. You could say with Strauss.
Oh, definitely. And there were plenty of moments where I was thinking to myself, he sounds like Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Like you can hear his Tony Stark voice.
Yep. Then you also have other actors too. Forgot their names, but you had, was it like some other, like villains or like.
Well, you had Matt Damon, he was great.
Matt Damon. Yep, as the general, he was really good. You also had there were a couple other guys. Hills, the guy that played Hills in the movie, the one with the glasses. He was always like holding like the clipboards and writing or scribbling something down.
Yeah, I didn't really identify all the characters' names very well.
Yeah, but I recognize him. Then I recognize one of the one of the people that was against Oppenheimer. He had like that black kind of almost like emo like hair. Basically, he had like the black hair kind of.
Oh, and he was wearing the glasses.
Not the glasses. No, there was two people that had the glasses, or three.
It was kind of hard to identify some characters based off of their names. Like some I knew who they were, others not so much. But there was one actor I did recognize. It was Dane DeHaan who was in this, and he was I don't remember his character's. Sorry about that. I don't remember his character's name, but yeah, I knew he was in this, and I recognized him. And do you know what the other movies Dane DeHaan has been in?
Which ones?
He was Harry Osborn in Amazing Spider-Man 2, the Garfield one. He was in Chronicle. He was one of the main characters in Chronicle.
All right.
I know he was in Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, but I think after that movie he had to like go into hiding almost.
Yeah. But there were a bunch of star casting, to say the least, in this film.
Yeah, and Emily Blunt was in this too, and she was great as ever.
Oh yeah.
Like no bad performance one bit.
Yeah.
I think. If I had, but yeah, like I said, with Robert Downey Jr.'s character, you can hear his Tony Stark voice come out.
Yeah.
Because he was trying some kind of accent. I couldn't tell what it was.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what it was, but he tried to play that out with his, kind of like a government, like some sort of like government role, basically. So he had to play something of like that, basically, political stuff, which Tony Stark could play that really well.
And then the actor that played Albert Einstein, I don't know who it was, but he was great.
Yeah.
I liked him. And he definitely looked like how Albert Einstein should look.
Yeah.
And then there was Niels Bohr, who was in this movie.
Yeah.
He's another scientist that came up in science classes when I was in school a lot. I think it was Kenneth Branagh that played him, and he was great. I liked him. So not a bad performance from everyone, including Florence Pugh, who was Jean Tatlock in this movie.
Yep, which Jean Tatlock was, if you don't know, she was the first love interest of Oppenheimer.
Oh, yeah.
The first one. And she died later on, but she was the first one before
Kitty came along.
Yep, which was then his wife, which then you could say he kind of took away from the other marriage, although the guy was, I guess, okay with it, but...
Yeah, like I remember reading in the biography of Oppenheimer that Kitty wasn't too invested with her first husband, and she wanted to be with Oppenheimer, and then the first husband was like, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think it was like the third or something like that, because she said first husband was a nobody. The second one, he eventually died, and she didn't want to be a widow. So then, that led to this guy,
Yeah, that's what I remember reading, and then eventually, at some point, Oppenheimer resumed his affair with Jean Tatlock.
Only for it was like a one night stand, type of scenario. It was that, but it was a one night stand, at least how the film portrayed it.
Yeah, and I mean, there was this scene where he was like basically telling all these government agents about his affiliation with Jean because she was a member of the Communist Party.
Yep.
And you see he's not wearing anything, and then Jean's in the room with him because you're sort of seeing in his head the recreation of what happened, but no one else can see this.
You also had Kitty who kind of like also sort of imagining it as well, like.
Yeah, that scene must have been uncomfortable to shoot. Because Nolan said he was very nervous filming scenes like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, again, you got two people kind of like sort of doing it in front of people and with cameras on.
Yeah, that scene must have been very uncomfortable to shoot.
Yeah,
And if Nolan was nervous about it, he has every right to feel that way.
definitely for sure.
Because, I mean, the scenes themselves, they weren't overly graphic. They were kind of tame.
They were. I mean, again, this was more of a factual storytelling, rather than
Yeah, I mean, for an R-rated movie, I mean, this movie does earn its R rating, but
Yeah.
it felt really... But I don't know, why is it R-rated movies feel kind of tame sometimes?
Well, I mean, R-rated movie does have, it can go either way. But the biggest thing is, does it have, nudity? Is there a good amount of swearing? Is there death?
Is there blood? Which there
Blood.
wasn't a lot of blood, really. I don't even think I noticed any.
Not a whole lot, not really. I think more of the bloodshed came from what you saw in terms of like the aftermath of the nuclear explosions and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's nice that, Nolan's showing restraint and he's not letting us see the devastation, because if this was done in the hands of a different filmmaker, that filmmaker would have gone all out with the gore and the graphic imagery.
Yeah.
But Nolan is good enough to have restraint to not
Yeah.
shock the audience too much.
Yeah, no.
And I will say this, like other Nolan films, this was very practical in its visual effects.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that's the great thing about Christopher Nolan, if you've seen his other movies, is nothing feels fake or artificial. Everything is real. And I mean, he did it well with Batman, he did it well with Dunkirk and Interstellar, and Tenet had some of the best visual effects when it came out.
Yep.
So he knocked it out of the park.
Yep.
And the music, I mean, it gave me Hans Zimmer vibes, even though he wasn't the one doing it.
No, but you also got like a lot of like even sounds effect too that can, especially in bigger theaters with with the sounds, like the echoing sound can be a lot more louder. There are some scenes where your eardrums could definitely
Be ringing.
be ringing, definitely for sure, which is either the people stomping their feet, or the biggest one, which could hurt a lot of people's ear, again in bigger theaters,
The testing scene of the first bomb test.
the nuclear explosion. Yep, of the sound effect.
I did hear online that some people were complaining about the sound mix and that you couldn't hear the dialogue in some scenes, but I have to wonder if that applied to IMAX, because I didn't have too much of a problem with that.
No, but I would imagine probably so with IMAX, just because again, if you're hearing, especially in the one scene where you had Oppenheimer and the interrogator guy, that Robin or something like that.
And it was kind of hard to...
The interrogator, the guy that was like, it was another actor I kind of recognized too from a different
Oh,
films.
wait, are you talking Jason Clarke?
Jason Clarke, yep.
Yeah, because I have recognized Jason Clarke in other stuff. I knew it was him.
Yep. So that guy was interrogating, Oppenheimer, and when the scene kind of came up again with them barking at each other back and forth, then you had the light, came out bright like the nuclear explosion, while the foot were stopping. That part I can see where people may have some issues, especially in IMAX, is because you had two guys kind of going back and forth, bickering about what was, again, the moral issue that was brought up in that film, or they brought that back up in terms of questioning. And while they were bickering back and forth, you had the feet stopping, you had the light coming up, and it started, the stomping, and then all of a sudden, again, the lighting, but more of the stomping started to overtake what Oppenheimer and Clark's character was saying to each other until it stopped.
Yeah, I could see people having an issue with that, but I understood all the dialogue.
Yep.
Like when I saw Tenet, like I had to turn on the subtitles with Tenet because it was pretty easy to tell where the dialogue was being drowned out by the sounds and the music. Here, I mean, I can see where people are going to have an issue with it.
There are a few scenes that you would have issue if you were saw it in IMAX, or if you have a home theater that has that capabilities.
Yeah, it's like, Nolan, we want to hear the dialogue, but it's like, no, the sounds and the music are more important.
Yeah.
I know when The Dark Knight Rises came out, people had a hard time understanding Bane, but I never did. I understood everything Bane was saying.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to go into that too much.
Yep.
But I do know for certain that, people will have an issue with it. I didn't have too much of an issue with it.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out what else I liked about this. I see. I talked about the acting. I talked about how the visuals were all very practical.
Yep.
I would say the themes of this film were done really well.
Yep.
They're kind of like, as soon as you walk out of this is kind of a thinking person's film almost.
It is, because again, the first part of the thinking is the moral issues.
Of detonating a nuclear weapon.
Especially so, and then the aftermath of the usage of said nuclear once you're done creating it. Not only using it, but also, like, once you use it, now everybody's, everybody knows about it. Everyone knows it's the capability of that. Now it's like, do we want to contain it? Which is, the obvious answer is yes, contain it.
Or do we want to regulate it, which for the most part, the world kind of has.
That's part of that containment is, regulations and stuff like that. Rather than what was happening in the Cold War, which was an arms race.
Oh, definitely. And there were so many by like the 1980s. There were like 70,000 worldwide.
Which brought about the idea of, basically, at the ending of the world, basically, at that point, because the amount of nuclear weapons that both the United States and the
Soviets had. And then there's other nations that do have nuclear weapons, but not as much as Russia or the United States.
No, because of how much each side was building up so much. But both sides knew of the destructions that,
And that's where mutually assured destruction comes in, that doctrine.
Yeah,
which is not mentioned in this, but if Nolan made a sequel, he'd want to talk about that.
Yeah. Which, again, Oppenheimer feared the fact that, you did create a weapon that could destroy the world. Especially if you threw that atomic bomb or any other nuclear weapon around the world more than, 7 times or whatever the case may be, could, destroy the world.
Yeah, and that's something they bring up a lot in this movie. They're like, if we do this, it could destroy the world.
Yep.
And he was telling Albert Einstein, can you do these calculations to, sort of see if that would happen?
Yeah.
And, well, they did that, but obviously it didn't destroy the world.
No, I mean, the idea was near zero, which was good, but it was the fact that the idea that even though it was close to zero, even though it was almost at zero, but the fact that there was a fraction of a chance that you could destroy the world is a fear factor.
Well, the only way you could destroy the world, like you said, is if they detonated many at a time.
Yep. Which, again, at the Cold War, when there are so many nuclear weapons at the ready, now you got the idea of Earth being into total ruins.
Desolate wasteland, or kind of like the Fallout games almost.
Fallout definitely has shown that a lot of times, for sure. Yeah, with the nuclear wasteland type of ideal.
Yeah, at least Todd Howard and his team with the Fallout games, they took the concept and they did something really interesting with it.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
But I do know that nowadays we don't have 70,000 worldwide. The stockpile's between 10,000 and 13,000.
Yeah, I mean, again, United States and Russia still have the most out of any countries in the world. But every other countries, at least first world countries, and maybe second, but mainly the first world countries, have at least a good amount of nuclear weapons. But everyone's in agreement, for those who have it, that you will not use it.
Because if you do use it, you're not going to win. Everybody dies.
Yep, everybody will die.
And then there's that, maybe the cockroaches will survive the nuclear war, which I don't know if that's true or not.
I mean, they're pretty tough SOBs to get rid of.
Yeah, but I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, that's kind of the thing about this movie is it brings up these interesting concepts of if we detonate it, will it destroy the world? And how should we make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands? Or something like that.
Yep.
It's really interesting stuff to think about, and you're going to walk out of this thinking about it the same way all these people did back then. Especially
so. And then speaking of, of that too as well, there was the Red Scare basically as well. I don't know if you remember.
The communist Red Scare, where they were trying to figure out who's communist and who isn't.
Yep.
I'm surprised McCarthyism didn't show up in this.
Yeah, it was more of that Soviet scare, basically, which played a part during the World War II aspect of it as well, and leading up all the way across the Cold War, which was communist spies, or, especially during the part of the Manhattan Project, which came out to be true with one person.
And that person being?
It was that Chris Pugh or something like that.
Chris.
or I don't know if Chris is the right name, but at least Pugh or something like
Florence
that.
Pugh?
Not Florence Pugh, but it was a character in the film that was part of the Manhattan Project, and it was one of the British people.
Oh, yeah, the British spy they discovered. He was working for the Soviets and
Yep.
passing the information along.
That part was actually, if you look it up, has been written in the books, basically.
Yeah, that's where you're talking about the Red Scare. Okay,
Yeah.
because they're suspecting, like, who's communist, who isn't.
Yeah. And because of the fact that even though this British spy was indeed a communist spy for the Soviet Russia, that's thus then led to Oppenheimer red alert, basically.
Oh, definitely.
So to speak. Like, everybody's all eyes on Oppenheimer. Because again, not only because, it was not only bad enough for the United States government to have a guy, in their eyes, who had such an affiliation to the far left in terms of communism, but now you had the one guy who was reportedly true that yes, he was gathering information and giving it to the Russians. Now Oppenheimer is back on being basically the CIA or FBI's, wanted list, basically.
Yeah, and it's like, we're watching you. We want to know if you're in contact with anyone.
Yep, because of the fact that you had this guy in your in your group. Now you're in some deep trouble.
Oh, definitely. They kind of focused on that, like, in the later half. Like, once we got past all the atomic stuff, that's what they focused on.
Yeah.
Mostly towards the end. It was kind of sprinkled here and there. But for the most part, I mean, the focus was... What's really nice is that I think, if I had to guess correctly, this film has a 3-act structure.
Yeah, the first act being the pre-Manhattan Project, which was his college days and also his university, university as a professor.
Yes, and then him meeting the other scientists and him getting into the Manhattan Project.
Which then led to the Act 2 of the Manhattan Project.
Yes, and then the second act was basically them testing this and building the bomb. And then the third act was after it got dropped on Japan, that's when they started doing all the questioning of, do you have these communist affiliations?
Yep, and that was, the third act being all that is the aftermath, like having to deal with the consequences of the nuclear weapon being dropped. Now you got, do we build them up? Do we stop this whole thing? Do we regulate it? Or are you part of the, did you have any affiliations with the Communist Party? Did you not? And then finally, also what played a good chunk of the film was the Louis Strauss. He was trying to get into like the Secretary of Commerce or something like that.
Secretary of was it Secretary of State or is it Congress?
I think like Congress or Commerce or something like that, if I remember correctly from researching a little bit. He was trying to get that position, but there were so many senators that were, or a good amount of senators that were against Louis Strauss because of what has transpired with him against Oppenheimer.
Yes, and I would say that's pretty accurate because that was actually there was a lot of scenes like that.
Yeah.
But I will admit there were no debate scenes between the senators in a political room. No House of Representative debatings.
No, but there were a lot of what was supposedly in terms of an Oppenheimer case was supposed to be him trying to get his credentials back. Turns out to be a little bit more of an interrogation rather than just a broad meeting. I mean, it was rather than like, okay, here's my reason, here's my thing, I'm not doing this and whatever. And again, you had the one integrator, which is Clark's character, who was more of the, integrator, and trying to go of like, kind of using these things, wordings, as even Kitty was pointing out too. He did rephrase a lot of wording to where no matter what you say, it's always going to go against them.
Yes, that is true. There's always the twisting of the words, twisting around the meaning, which is something that is still very relevant to this day.
It is still very relevant to the day, twisting of the words.
But I'm not going to go into that too much because I think everyone can sort of see that happening before their eyes.
Yeah, definitely. If you watch the film, you can definitely see Clark's character definitely twisting words, or twisting it enough to where no matter what you say, it's going to go against you, because if you say yes, well, then you play into their hand. If you say no, you may be you may be trying to defend yourself, but then you're also trying to deny it, which then will lead you to suspect.
Definitely. And then another positive I can give with Oppenheimer is that this movie, it felt original. Like there was nothing I could compare it to when I was watching it. And Nolan has a talent for making his films feel original and not derivative of something else.
Yep.
And so with Oppenheimer, nothing felt borrowed from another film. Nothing felt ripped off.
No.
It was all completely Nolan and him putting a lot of effort into his work, which is something I really appreciate of the guy. Like, he always finds a way to make his films feel original and unique, and they stand out from the rest.
Yeah.
There are a few visuals I kind of want to talk about, too. But before we get to that, because we talked about, like, how the sound could be eardrumming, especially if you watch in IMAX. I think we need to talk about the testing scene of the bomb.
Oh, you mean the explosion?
Yeah. When they start testing it, like, they do these very small explosions, and you see the smoke.
Yep.
But the actual boom doesn't come until a little later, and I actually thought that was very realistic for a bomb. Because, some bombs, you'll sort of hear the pop, but then there's other bombs where you just see the smoke and then the boom doesn't come till later. When they do get to the actual atomic testing, though, because I was actually warned about this scene.
Yeah, which is why, even though I didn't see you do this, but you were telling me that you did it.
Yeah, I was doing this in the theater. I had to plug my ears because I didn't know how loud it was going to be. But the theater we were in was not an IMAX, and even though I kind of wanted to see this in an IMAX, well, I'm like, maybe I should do a smaller screen.
Yeah, which again, if you definitely see it in an IMAX or bigger, it's going to hurt your eardrums, because the bomb explosion is very noticeable, and it will ring your ears.
Yeah, but the way they do it is like it's completely dark, and they're sort of counting it down. There's a lot of suspense building toward it.
Yep.
And when it goes off, the only thing you hear is Oppenheimer's breath.
Yep, or just breathing, either from Oppenheimer or from anybody. But yeah, it was just like him breathing. And then you eventually hear his word. Well, you hear... Yeah.
His famous quote, "I have become death, the destroyer of worlds," which was recited very well in this.
Yep, this was from a Sanskrit, kind of like quote, basically. So, yeah, you hear that wording, but again, mostly nothing. But then after he said that quote, that's when you hear the boom.
Yeah, it goes... I don't know if that's accurate, but...
Well, not like up like this, but it'll be more of like, even though it shoots up in the sky, but the force is kind of like right at your face, basically.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, the other thing I kind of liked about the explosion was it didn't look like... You know how we've seen pictures of nuclear explosions in history books?
Yep.
It didn't really look like those images that we had seen. It was more like a realistic image of if it went off.
Yeah.
Which is something that few have ever witnessed.
Yeah. Where if you were the people testing it at the time, or if you were the people that were flying on the bomber that...
Was it the Enola Gay that dropped it?
Yeah, or something like that, where that dropped the Hiroshima, and then the other bomber that dropped it on Nagasaki.
Oh yeah, like you've seen the images, but this was really well done. I did not notice any computer graphics in it.
Yeah.
But then you hear the boom, and I guess, yeah, if I did see it on an IMAX, it would have had my eardrums ringing. But I guess, because my sister had seen this movie before I did, and she said it was kind of a jump scare when the big boom happens.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't get too terrified because I knew it was coming.
Not jump scare in terms like in terms of like the frightening, of like a monster or something like that jumping at you. But it was more of the fact that it was like a whack almost, or like a big sound that just came out of nowhere. You're just like, like what the.
I think the only other time I've seen this in a movie where like it's all silent and then the big boom doesn't happen until like a little later.
Yeah.
Like the Crazies remake, for instance. At the end of the Crazies remake, the town is too infected with all the people that have been infected with the biological weapons. So the military drops a... I don't know what the right way to describe it is, but they drop a nuke on the small Iowa town. Yep. It's completely silent. You see the flashing light and then the big boom. And some people have said that's actually realistic too. And then the other time, and this is a completely different movie, in Disney's Dinosaur, when the asteroid collides
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like you hear the music, it's swelling up, and then it goes completely silent.
Yeah,
you see the bright flashing light, and then you don't hear a boom, but the wave is like coming towards you, and then
and like the big wind wave, and like the dust clouds is just coming right in.
yeah, and then the big dust clouds coming, and the characters they're running to the other side of the island, and they jump into the water, and
They try to jump across and stuff like that, try to get to safety, but it's like after that meteor crash, and it's like, well, now there's not very much water left because everything got vaporized.
Well, the water didn't get vaporized in that movie, but that would have happened if they detonated in water.
Yeah.
And actually, those were kind of my comparisons in terms of how well done this scene was. And I know I used completely different movies of different genres, but, I'm just trying to think of something good.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that scene was actually very well done. I will admit, it was very well done.
Yep.
Another scene that was kind of well done was when, there's scenes where you hear all these loud sounds around Oppenheimer.
Yep.
There was one scene where he goes into this, seminar room. I don't know which building it was. And you see all these, young people, or at least I think they're young people. They could be mid-30s, late 20s. It was really hard to tell. And then one of them, sort of screams.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell if that was supposed to be, the screaming of one of the people in Hiroshima or Nagasaki.
Are you talking about the one where it was a big auditorium or something like that?
Yeah, it was a big auditorium, and then you hear someone in the audience go, "Ah!"
Yep, okay, yeah, because that was the scene where he was making the speech after the bombing, but it was supposedly him, because again, it drowned out all, the cheering, everything stopped, the nuclear scene. You don't hear anything, but now all of a sudden you hear the screaming of, terror, basically, because again, he dropped it on a city.
Yeah, and that scream the audience member gives, I just realized what quote I can use to describe that.
What?
It's as if 1,000 voices screamed out in terror and then were suddenly silenced.
Oh. Okay.
Which is what Obi-Wan said in A New Hope. He's
Yeah.
like, I sense a disturbance in the Force.
Yeah.
It's like many voices cried out in terror and then they were suddenly silenced.
Yep.
It's kind of like a Death Star comparison almost. As soon as you see the Death Star, you scream, but then you're silenced because the laser hits the planet and blows it up.
Yeah, but because again, it's you hear in terror of explosion and just because that's all he could probably hear. After people are cheering, which you didn't. Again, that drowns it out. Then all of a sudden, the screams started to shake because again, in his thought process, everything's shaking. Again, explosion, everything's shaking.
Yeah, and then you see there's some people in the audience, they're kind of crying or in sadness because they're in complete despair.
Yeah, starts to see some, again, the aftermath of, again, the survivors of the bomb explosion.
Yeah, and then it gets really bright in the auditorium, the bright light.
Which then you can start some people, skins
Yeah,
starts to, rip apart.
Yeah, it looks like their skin is starting to slough off, but it looks
kind of from Terminator. I want to say 2.
Terminator 2, that scene where Sarah Connor, she's in Los Angeles, she's warning the people, get out, and then the bomb goes off.
Yep.
And you see the skin and then the charred bodies reduced to ash.
Yep.
Or atoms. There was a scene in the auditorium where he's walking in the room and then he looks down and he sees a charred body, kind of almost on a Pompeii or a Terminator 2.
Yeah, which also right before that scene though, that's when we get our other second big explosion. Well, the hearing of the big explosion.
They described this scene because I
remember how he, after he said, it was a bright light, and all of a sudden he was hearing it, and all of a sudden just you hear that boom again, and all of a sudden he's waking up, and it's whoa. Now you're in the middle, walking out of the auditorium, basically. It's whoa.
Yeah, I think I remember that scene a little bit.
Because it was the second that you hear the explosion, that big explosion.
Wait, was there someone coming up behind him to
It was, well, again, everyone's trying to pat him on the back, also just boom. Everyone's cheering, roaring, cheering.
Oh, yeah, now I know what you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, there's a pretty good use of sound throughout specific points in this movie, and that was one of them. And then there was one visual moment. They kind of sprinkled it throughout. You see these little intercuts of chain reactions and the stars of what could happen if you detonate something. The gravity, it would pull in all the stars.
Yeah, which again, that was his first theory before the the nuclear explosions or the atomic thing of what if the stars died, which was how we know about it. stars, when they die, they kind of come in and then just
They go supernova.
supernova.
And he was kind of sort of theorizing, okay, if we detonate something like up in the stars, the gravity would sort of like, that was a nice visual where the stars get pulled into this hole.
Yep.
I wouldn't really say it was a black hole. It didn't look like a black hole.
No, but the idea of like everything kind of like sucking in, and then because of the chain reaction, it would just then implode and then explosion and just poof.
Oh, definitely. Like there was a ton of really interesting scenes where you see all the chain reactions and all the theories.
Yep.
That was really well done. I can see the scientific community saying that this is pretty accurate, and
Yeah.
we kind of want to teach this movie in our courses.
Yeah.
Because I know with Interstellar, that's actually taught in science courses in college and universities. So I can see the same thing happening with Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
Like-
Especially with quantum physics. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And I think the writers of Rick and Morty are now going to put something like this in a future season.
Yeah.
Probably not season 7, because that one's in the can, they said. But maybe season 8 or 9, they'll put something like this in there.
We'll definitely see.
Because you know how Rick and Morty does all the quantum stuff?
Yep.
They're definitely going to do something like that. And if they don't, missed opportunity right there. Maybe Rick will say something interesting about it, but not too meta.
Yeah.
Hopefully not too meta, because I'll admit season 6 was way too meta for me. But anyway, yeah, those were like probably the best visuals in the movie when you intercut to like these different theories and all the chain reactions. They were really interesting to watch.
Yep.
And I also liked how the movie opened with Prometheus gave fire to the gods, and they chained him up to a rock, and he was tortured for eternity. And you see this fiery visual that's like reminiscent of Terminator 2.
Or I thought, wasn't it more he gave fire to man and then the
Yeah,
the
he
gods?
gave. Yeah, did I say it wrong?
I think it was. I believe the quote was he gave fire to man, then the gods chain him up for, and then torture him for centuries or something like that.
Yeah, I'll correct this, but hang on a sec, folks. Yeah, I think I got the quote wrong. Did I say Prometheus gave fire to the gods?
Yeah, I think you said to the gods, even though it's like gods could he.
Okay, I apologize for that. I scramble my words too
Yeah,
much.
but I think it was more of he gave fire to man and the gods punish him for it.
Yeah, that was a really nice quote to open with, because this movie was actually based off of a book, American Prometheus.
Yeah.
And so you see the like fiery visual reminiscent of Terminator 2 with
Yeah.
that quote. That was a really good way to open it, actually.
Yeah, and especially the ending too, where again when Oppenheimer was again going back to one of the beginning scenes where Oppenheimer was talking with Albert Einstein, and he was like, whenever I gave you the equation, and then I also told you that we may have figured out a way to destroy the world, Albert Einstein was like, yes, you did, and Oppenheimer said, well, I think we did, and that's
Yeah.
when we see the kind of like the potential, basically. I would say the potential.
Yeah, you see these ICBMs. I think that they're ICBMs.
Yeah, basically nuclear missiles, basically launching to the skies and then firing it, somewhere, across the earth, basically.
Yeah, and he's sort of imagining in his head. And then you see, towards the end of the film, Earth, and you see these, like, large, fiery...
Like a flame started to engulf the entire planet. Kind of like you would see out of, like, sci-fi, kind of like...
The closest, I would say...
documentaries or, like, something that you would see, like, they would, like, hypothesize of, like, how the world ending.
Yeah, the closest I would say to that visual, if you look at the ending of Terminator 3, it had something like that.
Yeah, of, like, just the globe burning, basically. It started to burn completely.
Yes, and even though I kind of said earlier the movie did feel original and Nolan didn't try to rip off anything, the ending part, I guess, with the bombs going off,
Yeah.
theoretically, it was a little reminiscent of Terminator 3, but it didn't rip it off too much. Like, I was reminded of it, and I guess
Yeah.
really there were other things I was reminded of, but it didn't really necessarily feel like a rip-off, more
No.
like inspired by.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out, okay, earlier I said the movie felt original because that's what Nolan does, but again,
Yeah.
maybe I'm kind of backtracking a bit. I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to figure that all out. But yeah, I mean, there was just a ton of good stuff to look at in this,
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
especially with the picture quality. It was really, really impressive to look at. But that's to be expected of a Nolan production.
Yeah.
And I think one other thing I want to bring up about the opening is the very first shot outside of the quote that we see is like a puddle of raindrops.
Yep.
I don't know if you got this, but that's actually a reference to Batman in this.
In terms of like with the puddle being like
In Batman the Killing Joke, it opens with a puddle of raindrops and then it like pans up to Arkham Asylum. This is in the comic. I know it was in the animated film too, but I saw that as a nice little visual reference to Batman the Killing Joke. And it's basically, it's kind of like Nolan almost telling us, hey guys, remember when I did my Batman trilogy? And I'm like, yeah, it was awesome, man. I don't know if that was intentional or not.
yeah.
But it was kind of something small that I picked up on.
Yeah.
What else is there that we can talk about with this?
Well, I was about to mention earlier about the Lewis Strauss going back to the whole like him trying to get into like I think like Secretary of Commerce or something like that in terms of like the Congress area, and then finally he was denied that. And a name that was mentioned was John F. Kennedy.
Oh yeah, like that's another thing. Is like is that I don't know what were they trying to go for that?
Again, this is a little bit more of the factual situation in terms of like it was more so of like telling because again we were showing in the beginning like okay Lewis Strauss and Oppenheimer seemed like like okay they're on good common ground. Later on you get to see that oh wait. Lewis Strauss had an agenda against Oppenheimer for what he did in one of the meetings or one of the open meetings and stuff like that, where he kind of like he told a joke to sort of embarrass Lewis Strauss.
Oh yeah, I remember that scene.
Yeah, it was like a joke or something like that, which again humiliated or embarrassed Lewis Strauss, which he took in offense against. Which then he at that point had an agenda against Oppenheimer because he felt like Oppenheimer was having the entire science community against Lewis Strauss, even though that wasn't the case.
Yeah, this sounds like a movie I'd probably want to watch again because there's a ton of details you're describing to me that I did probably see the first time, but I'd understand them on future rewatches.
Yeah, which was how the other young guy who was who was like at first was like, oh yeah, you're fine, and everything else like that. But as soon as he kept hearing more and more details about the story, then it's like, oh wait, okay, maybe you're not fine then after all. Maybe you're not fine. And then it all of a sudden when I was like, yeah, you did not make it. Yeah, it failed. And a lot of people were the holdouts who eventually voted against you. One of them being John F. Kennedy, who was later became president.
Yeah, and then he tried to get the space race going, John F. Kennedy, but I mean, we got as far as the moon.
Yeah, we got as far as the moon, basically. And again, this was during the time of Eisenhower's, presidency as well, during the Lewis Strauss, because Eisenhower wanted to appoint, Lewis Strauss, but Congress was not having it because again, what they felt like at the time was you weren't playing fair to Oppenheimer, a guy who helped create the nuke for us. Or the father of the atomic energy, basically.
Yeah, they were talking about that, especially when you see his face on the Time magazine.
Yep.
Actually, there's a couple of moments that I kind of want to talk about. There was one moment where we see, like, Oppenheimer, he's a little shaken up about the aftermath.
Oh, so you're talking about with Truman?
Yeah, with Truman, with the Hiroshima bombing. He's, like, completely shaken about it.
Yep.
And then Truman's like, well, no one's going to really care who made the bomb. They're only going to care about me because I'm the one who ordered it. And I'm like, well, eventually when the internet and stuff gets invented, they're going to find out about Oppenheimer.
Well, again, I kind of view it as this sort of thing. Yes, it's like you created the weapon, like a sword. But that doesn't mean you necessarily used it, per se. It's like, yes, you created the sword that then eventually caused blood to be spilled.
Yeah, because that was the thing Oppenheimer said is, I have blood on my hands. I feel really responsible for this.
Yeah, which we can understand at one point. But on the other hand, like, to Truman's perspective, you may have created the weapon, but I bloody used it. I have more blood than you have because I'm the one that actually decided to drop it. I said that I gave the green light to drop the thing, the thing.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the moments where it's like, this movie doesn't really take a side. It's like presenting both sides. You got the people that are for him, and then you got the people that are not so okay with this. You're getting both sides, like the whole picture, you know?
Well, the one hand of like, we did something terrible. It's like, no. You created it. I used it.
Yeah, and it's like, well, yeah, you did use it, Truman, but eventually later down the road, when the internet gets invented, people are probably gonna not have a high opinion about Oppenheimer.
Well, I can go both ways. But again, he created the weapon. It's the same way of like whenever people created certain weapons. Do we blame them for creating the sword? Do we blame them for creating the gun, the cannons,
And
the
then-
creator of the people, or do we blame the people that start to use them?
And that is actually an interesting question, and it's nice that they touch upon that issue with this. And it is very interesting when they talk about it.
Because again, it brings up the question of like, do you blame the creator or do you blame the user?
Either or whatever you decide to side with. And then during this conversation, Oppenheimer basically mentioned we should give the Los Atmos or Alamos?
Los Alamos.
Los Alamos. We should give Los Alamos back to the Indians, and I'm like, oh, not a good idea. They're gonna get the radiation, and then the cancer is gonna spread.
Well, there was a couple things with that. I don't think it was so much of the radiation. I think it was more so the fact that, which was one of the secretary brought up, if indeed, and which was true, that if the Soviets, they say if, but we know hindsight 2020, it was when the Soviets were building nuclear weapons as well. It was then, why not just keep it up?
Yeah, and eventually I don't.
It's still Los Alamos is still there to this day.
Oh, is it still in use or is it like abandoned?
It's still in use. It's still very well in use.
Yeah, but I don't think they've done any nuclear testing in the U.S. desert since like the 1950s.
No.
There was a regulation act, I forget what it was, but there was a regulation act where they're like, okay, stop testing in the desert.
Yeah, stop testing the desert, that is for sure. But it's still there. Los Alamos is still there to this day. It is still like in fact, a nuclear area though, for sure.
They just haven't like tested any massive bombs.
No, but it's still a nuclear kind of like facility or nuclear area, basically.
Oh, that's good. But like, someone's gonna probably make a visual joke where, well, you could test the bomb in Los Alamos, but then you could have someone go in the fridge that's lead lined, and they're not gonna survive. They'll have every bone broken in their body.
You're really gonna go bring up the Indiana Jones from Indiana Jones.
I'm sorry.
The fourth one.
I'm sorry. I had to bring it up. Like,
Yeah.
they could have had a small visual. Well, Nolan wouldn't obviously do that, but if someone else was directing this film, they could have had a small visual gag where you see a fridge getting flown from the first test or something.
I'm trying to remember, but I think somebody did pull a joke in a video game. Did a little Easter egg of pulling a joke of somebody doing that fridge thing, but it was more of a, you would have died than what Indiana Jones would have.
Yeah, because
Not too sure if it was Fallout that did it or another game that had the nuclear explosion.
Yeah, because the How It Should Have Ended parody of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, they had him come out and he was like, I've broken every bone in my body!
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I brought that up. It's just, my mind's kind of racing right now.
Yeah.
But then again, it always does when we, talk about this. But anyway. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what other moments were there, because we've kind of run out of most of the major moments.
Yeah, because other than like some other, again, political stuff in terms of like the Red Scare, because that, good chunk of it came up from time to time in the film, basically, of the Red Scare moments of like, you were affiliated with this person who had some connection to the Communist Party. It's like they were former members. Whether that be like his neighbor or his brother or his fiance
or his former lover, which she was,
she was, but then she died, so you can't really question her anymore because she's dead.
Yeah. I think one last thing I kind of want to mention, because we've kind of run out of moments and some other stuff to talk about, is usually when people do period pieces like this, when filmmakers do period pieces like this, you have to put a lot of effort to make me believe that it's happening within the 40s and the decades that it's taking place in. Mm-hmm. And I would say Nolan did a really good job doing that with the production design.
Yep.
Because if this was in the hands of someone else, it would have been really distracting to see like specific actors in these roles.
Yep.
Like but with Nolan, he's able to make it look like, he put a lot of effort into the hairstyles and the fashion of the time. He did a lot of effort with that, and it was really nice. And actually, Cillian Murphy, the way he looks in this movie, he looks pretty darn close to how Oppenheimer looked in real life.
Yep.
And then Robert Downey Jr.'s character, which was the Lewis guy.
Yep.
Like, that kind of looked like something from the old days, even though I could tell it was him.
And then Matt Damon as the general, or the colonel,
Yeah, they did put some effort into that, too. So it's nice that this movie, it's a period piece, but it wasn't distracting to the point where it took me out of the movie.
Yeah.
And its visual style was really well done, which is something I expect from Christopher Nolan.
Yep, definitely for sure.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think I've just kind of run out of stuff to talk about, really, with this.
I guess the last one we could talk about is the discussion on where to drop the bomb, basically. Whenever the Secretary of War or...
Oh, yeah, because I remember in history class, from what I remember, there was talk of potentially dropping multiple atomic bombs on different cities in Japan, but they never went past number 2. Like, there was ideas on possibly dropping a third, but they never did it.
No. And and this was also true where Kyoto was taken off right away.
Like, they firebombed Tokyo, and they did mention they firebombed Tokyo.
Yeah, which was, again, capital at the time, but they cut off Kyoto.
Yeah, I think I kind of missed that one, because you said it was in there.
It was in there, yeah, which was, again, they didn't want to attack Kyoto because of cultural reason, and that was true. That was true because Kyoto, I believe even to this day, that is a significant culture to Japan. Like, cultural reason to Japan. So, it was like, you bomb it, now you really would have pissed them off.
Oh, that's actually a legitimate reason for why they didn't drop it on Kyoto.
Yeah, because again, and it's the secretary, I believe it was the secretary or something like that, was mentioned that. Well, she had 2 reasons. 1, cultural, which was legit. You do not want to bomb something that meant something to significant meaning to a country. And the second being because he went there for the honeymoon. Which was brought up which was also true because he brought it up and actually it was written in history as well.
I think I remember hearing the honeymoon part.
Yep, because again, Kyoto. Because again, imagine if like somebody were to drop a bomb on Mount Rushmore.
Oh yeah, that's a cultural center for the U.S., but we have others too.
Or the Liberty Bell.
Oh, definitely.
Or again, any cultural significant. Again, Mount Rushmore or the Liberty Bell, or again D.C., which had the Washington Monument.
Oh yeah,
or the Lincoln Monument.
That too. I mean, they could. Yeah, I mean,
it's just something to where you would really pissed off that country to say, all right, that's it. We're not holding back any longer.
I just learned a new fact, and that's actually a legitimate reason for why they won't drop it on Kyoto. So good job.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I think we've sort of run out of stuff to talk about almost. But if I had to bring up one little visual joke or gag, or not gag or joke, but maybe someone will do this in a parody. If they do, it'd be kind of nice. Maybe there's a post-credit scene where after the bombs go off, we like cut to maybe the ocean and it's kind of swirling, and then you see
Don't bring up Godzilla.
Come on, I had to bring up Godzilla. Like, you see Gojira burst out of the water and then... Like, I was just kind of thinking, maybe if someone did a parody of Oppenheimer, like a online parody, you could have the post-credit be Godzilla comes out of the water.
Oh, God.
And I'm not trying to, offend or anything. I'm just saying, that's the most logical thing you could do.
Yeah.
Because when they're talking about, like, how we might have destroyed the world,
yeah.
Well, yes, but what if you created a giant beast that rises out of the sea and it, like, starts terrorizing everybody?
Yeah, that was Japan's idea. Just remember that. We dropped 2 bombs, which then brought about, not just their destruction, but then their colorful creativity.
Yeah, that too.
Which brought about Godzilla, which brought about video games, which brought about anime, which brought up all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that to offend, I'm not saying, I'm not bringing up Godzilla to offend. I'm just saying, if someone does a parody, and they might, we will see a post-credit of Godzilla rising up because of these bombs.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, I don't know if anyone's going to do that, really.
No.
I'm sorry, I just had to
Well, there may be one that could.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I just had to bring that up. But yeah, I mean, I would say this was a really well-made film, and I actually enjoyed my time, and I probably would see it again. Because I do have some family members that actually want to see this now.
Yeah, I do also. When I talked about it after seeing it the first time, I brought it up to some family members, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we want to go. I would like to see it as well."
Yeah, because I would say this movie, it will definitely get Oscar nominations by next year. It's definitely a thinking person's movie. And what's nice, like I said, it doesn't really pick a side. That's up to the audience to decide which one they want to be on.
Yeah.
But it will leave you with a ton of questions. It'll make you think about a ton of stuff. And
Yeah.
for a character study biopic, it was really well done.
Yeah, character study, bio, a war. Even though you don't see a lot of the war, but it's still a war movie because it took place in World War II, and it was also the Cold War, and drama too. Drama definitely for sure.
Oh, definitely. And then, actually, there's one more moment I kind of want to mention. Is like it was earlier on in the movie where someone said if Hitler wasn't blinded by hate, he could have gotten a hold of these weapons.
It was when Oppenheimer and Damien was talking about okay, we got Germany has a 2 year ahead of us, but it won't go through right away. And the general was like, well, why? Oppenheimer said because Hitler hated the Jews, and because of his hate, he will say that's false or downplay that, which will delay them on anything else.
And that's where I'm trying to get at here. Is like he's so blinded by his hatred for the Jews that he can't see the bigger implication, and he could have built the bomb, but didn't. But at least the Wolfenstein games have explored that more than I would say some other stuff has.
Yeah, because Wolfenstein brought up the idea, well, what if they actually listened and actually did the nuclear thing ahead of time?
Yeah, and then they drop it on New York City, because you actually go through the irradiated New York in the second game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was kind of another moment that reminded me heavily of Wolfenstein.
Yeah, because of Hitler's hatred towards the Jews, even though, again, they were in Germany, but because since they were Jews, Hitler hated them, thus downplayed the whole thing, thus then that, even though they had a 2 year jump start, it never progressed any further than what it was.
Yeah, and that was actually kind of interesting because Oppenheimer was the one, they say he was born in America, right?
Yep.
And I don't think, I could be wrong on this, but I'm not completely well versed in the biography, but didn't he go to a European nation at one point?
That was the first act one of the movie.
Yeah, he did. I don't know why.
He went to a few different universities in Europe to learn quantum physics because it wasn't taught in America at the time.
And then he wanted to go back to America because, well, I need to help the Americans with the understanding of quantum mechanics and physics.
Yep.
And so if he had stayed in Europe, well, then the Nazis could have gotten a hold of him, kind of like if they had kept Einstein.
Yep.
Yeah, now that actually is something... That was really well done, too, the way they had told this story.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would say, go see this one. This is a really well done Christopher Nolan film, as always. Mm-hmm. And it will leave you with a lot to think about. And if you feel the film's a bit too bleak, because some people might think this is a little bleak, I mean, it wasn't terribly depressingly bleak.
No, the only depressing moments was the fact that it was probably more so of the Act 3 of when Oppenheimer was sort of on one hand losing the initial battle of his credentials, his security clearance, but then on the back end, because of that, when people learned more about or got dug deeper a little bit more of what was happening, he got more sympathies. Because it's even though you created a nuclear and stuff like that, but you helped America became what it was today, basically.
Yeah, that was another
potentially
thing.
Is. You were a war hero, basically.
Yeah, there was another thing they mentioned, but whether or not Oppenheimer was really a war hero, it kind of depends on who you talk to.
Or a war and American hero, just because of the fact that you created a nuke, which helped ended the war, and ultimately, too, ended potentially bigger wars to come, because of the fact that, again, nobody wants to use a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, like that's the deal. Is like if we use it, no one's gonna win. We're all gonna perish.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. So it's like
Unless you get some humans off world and send them to Mars.
Yeah. But again, we talked about how the fact that, because I know you mentioned about using nuclear to destroy asteroids in space.
Yeah, like I said, you could use a nuke to destroy an asteroid that's incoming with the Earth, and maybe you could send Bruce Willis and his team up to the asteroid. They drill and then they like blow it up from the inside.
Yeah,
I just referenced Armageddon.
Yeah. I mentioned the fact of using nuclear in space, which could cause still a significant damage. Because again, Oppenheimer's theory of stars dying and then, causing supernova, causing a nuclear explosion in space could cause some effects, one of them being the moon if it's in, well enough distance.
Yeah, if you detonated the moon with a nuke, that would cause some devastating effects for the Earth. Like the seas would, I don't know how it, I know the moon affects our tides in the seas.
Yep.
But I don't know if it would cause giant tsunamis or something else.
It could cause some tidal waves and potential tsunamis, depending on how badly the moon is damaged.
And then you could have chunks of the moon fall to Earth, and then there's a better Moonfall movie right there than the actual Moonfall film.
Yeah. And thus also with the moon kind of breaking apart, well, now what could happen to the Earth itself? Not just physically speaking, because again, parts bashing into Earth and causing craters and destructions in other areas, but also what's going to happen to the waves? What's going to happen to the Earth in terms of its
rotation, its axis?
Yeah.
What could happen to the magnetic field, even?
Yeah.
Although I'm not completely well versed in that.
Yes. So using nuclear to destroy asteroid, one thing, decent idea, but but that could also cause even greater damage.
Yeah, unless you send the if you can see it, because there's the Hubble telescope and all these other advanced telescopes. If you can see it from a distance, and then you tell the astronauts, if we had highly advanced spacecraft, okay, we're going to send you out there, but you got to make sure that when you detonate this thing, it's very far away from the moon and the Earth.
I think the only possibility that you could combat asteroids, potentially, railguns, if it's powerful enough.
Do we even have railguns at the moment?
Navy uses railguns. I believe, if I remember correctly, the Navy uses the railguns. At least the American Navy, if I recall. But you have to create enough power into the railguns to even make something like a blast into the atmosphere, and then just cause a big wave to impact enough to where the asteroid could, explode.
Or if you had a really advanced ion cannon that could fire into the asteroid.
That too. But I would think a railgun, a bigger railgun, kind of for those people who have played Ace Combat 4 and a little bit 7, but mainly 4, kind of like Stonehenge. Even though Stonehenge, which we know today, is more of a mythical kind of
It's kind of a mystery, really.
The mysteries of the building. Stonehenge in Ace Combat 4 and 7, but more in Ace Combat World, it is supposedly an anti-asteroid thing with 6, 7, 8 cannons, basically, rail cannons, powerful enough to destroy big asteroids. Of course, though, if you use it, smaller bits and pieces of it can still crash onto the Earth.
Yeah, the smaller asteroid fragments, but maybe not enough to destroy the whole world.
Yes, which will not destroy the world, but could still cause countries to have significant damage.
Or if it lands in the ocean, it'll cause a giant tidal wave.
Something of the sort. Again, nothing that could destroy the world, but could still cause damage, nonetheless. To a lesser degree in terms of magnitude.
Yeah, I know it would cause earthquakes, big magnitude earthquakes.
It will cause that for sure, but it wouldn't be global, completely global altering ending per se. It will cause shake, damage, destruction, and stuff like that to countries in certain countries, which would then you will need the whole globe at that point to repair what the world did basically.
Yeah, and even if an asteroid did, destroy the Earth, it wouldn't necessarily completely kill the planet. It would wipe out the current species, and then the Earth would rebuild itself.
Yeah.
Depends kind of on the size of the asteroid, because the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs, for example, it basically destroyed the Earth around that time.
Yeah.
But it killed all the dinosaurs. The survivors were most likely the mammals.
Yeah, which
And the Earth did rebuild itself into what it is we have today.
because the mammals, I believe, had the capabilities of was able to do other things which the dinosaurs could not.
Exactly.
Which again, with the dinosaurs, because they couldn't do something that the mammals could do, they died and the mammals lived on, while Earth healed itself.
Yeah, so an asteroid wouldn't really destroy the Earth. It would just kind of be a reset of sorts.
But again, if you have power enough railguns, you could still save people, though. Although you could save a lot of people, but not everybody. It will still cause damage, again, like I said, to the globe, and you will have to do some repairs.
Or maybe they could build a BFG 10,000 and blow up the asteroid. Because you remember that scene in Doom Eternal where he fires the giant BFG towards Mars, and then Dr. Samuel Hayden is like, "You can't shoot a hole in the surface of Mars." Then he's like, and then,
Yep.
like they could, if they invented something like that, that could blow up the asteroid.
Could, but again, with railguns at this point, I would say more logically, could be a possibility. Again, in Ace Combat 4 and 7, there were about mainly in 4. Again, like I want to say 7 to 8 cannons that could destroy it. But then after the asteroid, it was more mainly used as an anti-air, kind of like cannons basically, which by that point, used, and it has a big enough radius too. And it's like, well, yeah, if you have the cannons, you have very much a very well defense mechanism.
Another thing they could do, and this is actually something that NASA tested, they fired like a probe to an asteroid to change its trajectory. I remember hearing about this. It slammed into the asteroid and the asteroid changed trajectory.
Yeah, because you could also change it, just slightly alter it too, because it goes on the fact that if you hit it just a tiny bit, it could eventually alter it.
Yeah, we've had tons of near misses over the years. I remember with the asteroids, news stations would report on it and stuff. But that's something they could do, actually. They could send out a probe and change the trajectory if it slams into the asteroid. But you got to make sure it has to keep in check with the density, the velocity, the mass of the object.
Yep, and you have to hit it with just enough force to where it can feel the effect, thus then altering it.
And I'm pretty sure there's a ton of smart people that can build stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not the people with Elon Musk, though, because I don't trust that guy.
You don't trust Elon Musk?
He's a weirdo, but I think everybody knows that.
Yeah, but he was able to get, spacecraft into space and then land back.
Yeah, but some of his ideas are kind of weird. Like, he said he wanted to terraform Mars by dropping nuclear weapons on it, and I'm like, you fool. Like, I don't think that's going to work. If you're going to terraform a planet, there's a better way to do it than nuking it. Like, he legitimately said that, and I'm like, you fool.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know. There's got to be a better way to terraform a planet than using nukes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does have potential water, which we have known that it does have some water.
Yeah, like they found water on Mars. If you detonate a nuke on Mars, like that's gonna make it poisonous and radioactive.
Yeah.
And I'm like, seriously? I mean, I don't know. They'll probably figure something out in the far future, but who knows?
Oh, they'll probably will for sure.
Yeah. I think another thing I kind of want to bring up before I bring up to the last thing is that if we had seen Barbie back to back with this, like, what movie would we prefer? Although we obviously know what we're going to prefer.
Back to back with this movie?
Yeah.
Or...
If we had seen the two films back to back, like other people have been doing, which one would we have preferred? And I think I know what the answer to that's going to be.
What, Oppenheimer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, had we seen Barbie, which we're not going to do that. It was like 5 hours of movie. I'm not sitting through 5 hours of movie.
But if you see Oppenheimer back to back, even though we like the film, but that's 6 hours in.
6 hours? I mean, Barbie wasn't that long to justify 6 hours.
No, I'm saying if you see Oppenheimer twice.
Twice?
Like I did. I mean, even though not twice in the same day.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Like, if you saw Oppenheimer 2 times the same day, it'd be 6 hours. Because 3 plus 3 is 6. Okay. But, I mean, Yeah, I think really I would have preferred Oppenheimer over Barbie anyway, but I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah.
Because I've had enough rants about that movie in past videos we've done already. I'm not going into that again.
Yeah.
But anyone who has seen the movie, all the power to you. It's not really my kind of movie. And if I'm going to watch a movie with a female lead, I can think of so many other better examples, like Wonder Woman. But I already went into that already, so I don't need to go into that again.
All right.
I think before we close this video, because we kind of had some surprise trailers. Well, one surprise trailer. The others we had seen already.
Others we have seen already for sure. The one biggest surprise was the GameStop.
Yeah, it was called Dumb Money. It's a movie about the Reddit stock exchange thing with GameStop.
Yeah, we'll all probably remember, unless you watch this in like 20 years from now, then I guess here's a little history lesson for you, unless you already read the reports on it to this date, or to that day, or whatever it is, 2050 something, or something like that. But someone on Reddit, because of GameStop was eventually going down and was on the brink of basically bankruptcy,
yeah,
or
and then
about to close it down completely, one Reddit user decides to, convince people to buy stock in GameStop, which then skyrocket GameStop by unbelievable margins.
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised they made a movie about this fast.
Yeah, it was really fast because it was just so recent that all of a sudden you just made a movie about it.
Yeah, and it's like I'm pretty sure people who are really into business are gonna love the movie. I'm not completely into business, so it's not for me.
It's more on the stock, not so much. Maybe a little bit business.
Well, stock and business are kind of interchangeable.
Yeah, a little bit interchangeable. Will it be more about the stock market per se and how you play it? I know my dad, when he first initially heard about it, he was like, "This is so dumb," because he's like, "That's just gambling. That's not playing. That's not doing stock market. That's just gambling."
Mm-hmm. It's like some people could joke, "Remember, kids, gambling is good for you."
Yeah.
But gambling's not good for you. It's a great way to lose your money.
Yeah.
Especially if you go to Las Vegas, you're going to be bankrupt.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But also, again, was it a big gamble at the time? Well, of course it was in terms of GameStop. But I guess it played out at the time well for that guy, and every other stock market people were like, "We're losing money fast."
Yeah. I mean, that movie, I could definitely see a lot of people going to see that.
Yeah.
I probably won't because it's not really the kind of movie that would fascinate me too much. But,
No.
I mean, GameStop is probably going to go away very soon because,
Yeah.
once console gaming goes full digital, and it most likely will,
Yep.
well, GameStop's out of business.
That's for sure. Unless they change their game plan, but otherwise, yeah, it will eventually die out.
I just kind of want to know, will the retro gaming stores go out of business? Because, if stuff's going fully digital, the retro gaming will probably go out of business.
Probably, but again, unless they alter their game plan to make something possibly emulators.
Well, a lot of the smaller scale, retro gaming stores are not as big as GameStop is.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Maybe, but...
But selling emulators is kind of a hard thing to do because there's a lot of legal issues surrounding those.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair, it'd be nice if we did have really good emulators so I could play these old video games.
Yeah.
And we kind of do, but some of them require, mod kits.
Either mod kits or in one way, subscriptions, aka Nintendo Switch has their basically, because you know how you have the year subscription type of ordeal, like any other PlayStation, Xbox, they have their yearly or monthly subscriptions and stuff like that.
Yeah, but the problem is there's some games that are digital that are fully exclusive to those services that once they go, there's no way to save them.
Yeah. But in terms of the Nintendo Switch, though, it's just hey, here's your, you could have these things, or you can have this, but you could also have access to the emulators,
That too.
which will cost, a little bit, 20, $10-20 extra, because you're getting two emulators, but you're getting a gear, plus you're getting access to the emulators that they are offering.
Yeah, that's true. It'd be nice if there was I know there's a really good PS2 emulator, but it'd be nice if Sony actually got that and sold it so I could play a ton of old PS2 games.
Yeah.
Because there's a ton of games I missed out on.
Although Xbox is doing a lot more, which they have done, more recently and successfully compared to PlayStation right now when they're trying to work on it. I know, or at least they're. I think they're successful right now with their PlayStation 5, or at least working on it. Backwards compatibility with some of their older games.
Yeah, I know PlayStation and Sony are doing it, but they really need to beef up their efforts because I know for certain that they said if you bought an old PS1 classic on your PS3, you get it on the PS5 for free.
Yeah.
But other stuff requires PlayStation Plus.
Yep.
I do not think, though, that the GameStop movie is going to comment on that, though. But you were going to finish something you
I
wanted
was
to
gonna
say?
say like again compared to like Xbox though, which you can even access like old Xbox One games even to play on the Xbox Series.
Yeah, that too. And then, so we'll see how that movie plays out. The other trailers were kind of stuff we had already seen on probably the internet already. There was Dune Part 2,
Yep.
which that I actually want to see.
Yep.
Because I want to see how they conclude the story, and we actually liked the first one a lot.
Yep. And then we also had the other sci-fi fiction. Yeah.
There was The Creator, which we
The
already saw
Creator.
a trailer for that for, but
Yeah.
I actually want to see that because that is Gareth Edwards' return to mainstream movie making after his hiatus from Rogue One.
Yeah, and then you also had the
Equalizer 3.
Yep, Equalizer 3.
Which is basically Denzel Washington's.
Equalizer.
Is basically his action hero, I
Yep.
could say.
Yep, and then there was.
There were only 4 trailers throughout the whole movie, or before the movie.
Yeah, I know you were creating like a list too, though, for sure.
Yeah, I always create trailer lists, so if we ever talk about the trailers, I can, we can sort of talk about them a bit. But of the trailers, the 2 I want to see the most are Dune Part 2 and The Creator.
Yeah, those 2 will be interesting.
Yeah,
Sure.
because the creator, it has this really nice visual style to it. It's almost like if Neil Blomkamp did this movie, although he's doing Gran Turismo. It's almost like if he was doing The Creator. It's kind of got that visual style of his almost, but it doesn't necessarily feel like his completely.
Yeah, and of course the creator also has the other aspect, or once again bringing up the idea of like AIs being super advanced to where
Yeah,
they go
it could go malicious. and
malicious against humanity.
initiate a war against humanity, which we have seen in Terminator, and we've seen that in other
And-
stuff.
In other like media entertainments.
Yeah, and because of Oppenheimer, Nolan's hoping that the movie will generate some talk about
We need to keep our AI regulated and under control before it gets super malevolent. And we were talking about this before the movie started,
that the big tech companies have all signed a statement that we're going to monitor it so it doesn't become super malevolent.
and I said to you that it's probably centuries away.
Which I could agree, but I brought up the fact that there is still a probability in the near future that there could still be an AI that can still be generated to replicate human actions, basically, or like the mindset. Another case being going back to Ace Combat 7, to where scientists were plugging into codenamed Soul One, leader of the Soul Squadron, and he was an ace, and they were using all of his actions, his reflexes in air combat, his instincts and everything else like that, and replicating it onto drones, which then the drones will try to replicate in their combat.
Basically, what you're saying is it won't be to where we're using the joystick anymore. The drones will operate by themselves.
Operate by themselves based on what they have learned, or gather all their information and taking it onto themselves and using it for themselves, basically.
Yeah, when you described it, I could see that.
In the near future,
Like maybe around 2050 or onward.
something like that, or roughly around that point, to where, because I know I'm hearing that where America is onto their 6th gen aircraft, which leads me to believe that, okay, based on what I've heard, we're getting closer and closer to the idea of AI aircrafts, basically, potentially speaking. Either that, or even getting closer to like spacecraft, almost.
Spacecraft that could go into space and
Or spacecraft that, or even aircraft that looks like spacecraft, even though it can't get into space yet, but like close enough to where it's like it's powerful enough to just to obliterate anything.
What about the satellite technology? They could program the satellite technology to do that.
Potentially. I mean, there is potential to that one as well. But we are getting closer to, I mean, again, the aircraft apparently in the 6th gen idea is that it's going to be tailless.
Which is an interesting thing to think about.
Which, again, because of if it is indeed tailless, that, again, that's closer and closer to spacecraft flight. Because a lot of spacecrafts or space air, fighters, they don't have tails.
Kind of like what you see in Star Wars and other sci-fi properties.
Yeah.
They could come up with some interesting designs, but you never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
But I mean, with the writers and actors strike going on now, there's the concern that AI is going to start writing scripts and there'll be no more human writers anymore.
I'm not too worried about in terms of the writer aspect creating it, because I think that's more of the fact that like the I'm trying to remember, it was just recent to this AI generator thing.
Chat GPT.
Yep, that one. It was more of that theory of being, for the writers, you could use ChatGPT to write a movie or something like that, or write something.
Yeah,
and then generate that to a movie.
There was a writer for a show, I forget what it was, but he used it to help write an episode.
Yep.
But he did not like the results one bit. He thought they were pretty bad.
Yeah, because again, you can bring up the idea using ChatGPT, but it may not, if you just go based off of that completely, it may not end too well. You could definitely use it as a foundation.
Yeah, maybe.
As a foundation, then you can make edits off of it to make it better.
Yeah, maybe they could do that, but I mean, people could abuse the system.
Now, for the actors, I know you talk about this too with the actors, of them using the AI like we've seen from Rogue One.
Or we saw it in The
Flash, which was probably the worst case scenario because it looked terrible.
Of of AI face of like younger actors
or dead actors.
Or dead actors.
It looked really bad in The Flash, but what they used in Rogue One, I didn't mind too much.
Yeah. Now, that is more of what I kind of think of what gaming industry uses today. Is just, you pluck, a lot of things into, people's body, and then they do, like, the movement, kind of
like you do motion capture suits,
yep,
and then you have the likeliness and stuff.
Yep, and then, but instead of using, like, the face, for certain characters, you can just digitally draw it in, basically. And then the AI can replicate that, basically.
I could see them doing that, but it's like they don't really need to bring back actors from the dead to do stuff like that.
No, or you don't even have to use the actors at all. You could just basically use anybody like you and I, and then they can just create the person, and they can digitally do whatever, and then bring on different voice actors, which again, voice acting is now becoming more prominent, or becoming more and more prominent. Then they can use that basically to be their voice actors, rather than, the actual, like, actors and actresses, which is probably why some of the actors are on strike.
Yeah, and, I mean, the thing is, like, I really hope that some good outcome comes out of this, and, they try to reach a deal, but we'll never know.
Yeah, because I think that was more the idea of them fearing that the gaming industry may come into, the ideas of it may come into movies.
That would be a strange merger right there.
But I think to conclude this video, I'm actually interested to see what Nolan does next in his career.
Yeah.
But we'll see, because whenever he announces a new project, I'm always fascinated with what Nolan's going to do.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got to wrap this up here. So I would recommend go see this movie. It's actually really well done.
Definitely a really good movie.
I know, I'll have you thinking about a lot.
Yep.
But in terms of seeing it back to back with Barbie, if you do that, all the power to you. But if you just want to see one, that's cool too. Anyway, I got to wrap this up. So next time we'll see Blue Beetle. We'll see y'all then.
All right.
All right, we'll see you then.